that fool. You will think I'm really cool. All I wanna do is impress you with my mouse trap. All I wanna do is convince you with my cheese. All I wanna do is be the coolest cat here, but I'll need some more super breed. Just wash me, mouse. Just wash me, catch you. Just wash me, mouse. Just wash me, catch you, catch you, catch you. All I wanna do is impress you with my mouse trap. All I wanna do is convince you with my cheese. All I wanna do is be the coolest cat here, but I'll need some more super breed. Oh, but I need some more super breed. Oh, but I need some more super breed.
Hello, MouseHunt. Good morning, evening, or afternoon to everybody. Today, the Math Awakening there in the chat says, when you hear music, that's Dave. I guess so. Hello, everybody. Like I said, my name's Dave. Welcome to Feedback Friday. Today is February 18, 2022. Pretty sure. Hope everybody in the chat is doing well today. Thank you so much for joining me. Hello to everybody. KDM, hello to you. Tarako, Blue Viper, hello, Mr. Dave. Well, hello to you, Mr. Viper. Eileen, always a pleasure to see you. Cam, Cohort, Dark Stormy. Salim, good morning. You miss them red candles, don't we all? I know even when we went to shut it down, Giorgio was even joking around a little bit like, oh, no, there's some weird server. I can't shut it down. I'll try again next week. It's like, oh, just leave it going a little longer maybe. But yeah, those candles have been extinguished for now, but it was certainly a fun event. Hopefully everybody had a lot of fun with Lunar New Year. Ben, hello back to you as well. Jessico, yo Dave, yo to you as well. And Math Awakening, get a little chuckle there, right? Party time, says Tim. All right, I like the attitude, Tim. Sounds good to me. Lady Nutsy, pleasure to see you as always. Hannah, Peter, and Osh, good morning. Much love from Singapore. Well, much love from Canada. Well, today I thought we would take a little bit of a closer look at an update that we've mentioned on previous Feedback Fridays called the Shops Update, or Shops Refresh is what we're calling it internally as well. But it's a pretty big update to the shops. It's going to touch pretty well every area in the game, I think, more or less. So it's just kind of do a little bit of a preview of it, a little bit of a sneak peek, even demo a few things. We got set up in a test environment. And we spoke about this update in the past, said similar things here, like we're adding a cheese shop, a Trapsmith and general store to nearly every location in the game. The charm shop and the cartographer, we're going to do those a little later. We have some similar plans as well, but in some ways it's good to put this out, get some feedback that may help guide some decisions as well when we take a look at those shops in particular. And the charm shop, we actually started, originally we're like, oh, we'll do them all at once. And it was, there's a lot of charms. There's a lot of charms in the game. So we said, you know what? Let's put that on the back burner and come back to that later so we can get these shops out a little sooner. Even hindsight, the Trapsmith was biting off quite a bit. Not more than we can chew on, but we had to chew it for quite a while to stretch a metaphor to its limit there. And even hindsight, maybe we could have got the cheese shop out a little bit sooner, because that alone is just going to be a huge quality of life improvement, being able to buy cheese from pretty well anywhere in the game. Math says, nice epic coin you have there, Dave. Yeah, that's the gilded coin that you'll find in various gilded maps. So that's unfortunate. I don't have a high resolution asset of gold. I was looking, well, we're doing shops. I need some sort of item to put up on the screen here. And I did not have a high resolution version of the Nanian gold coins. So that may have to put in a request. I think Jacob illustrated that. I don't know if he has a high resolution version or not, but we have to add that to the code base. Thank you for the haircut comments. Yeah, I was finally able to get out and get a trim. Yeah, so I don't have to wear a hat everywhere I go. Things were shut down here for a little bit. Just as I was ready to go in for a trim, everything got shut down. Couldn't go out to the barber shop, but thank you. Math, beautiful golden coin, yum yum. Yeah, it looks pretty nice. Yeah, I like all the little jewels in the gilded coin. And Cohort says, yay, no more mistake hunting due to travel. Exactly. It's aimed at reducing the need to travel as well as having to remember where to go to buy what. I mean, even I struggle with that. As more areas get added to the game, as more things to buy are available in shops, it just gets harder and harder to memorize that, right? And you find yourself checking the wiki, or you're traveling around like, wait, nope, not there, not there. I mean, especially somewhere like the tribal isles where there's so many things to buy, as is, I find myself constantly like, oh, I gotta go back to Cape Claude just to buy some coconut milk. So that's kind of one big thing in terms of the general store is just, add things that are relevant to that area where there's a decent chance you're going to want to buy it while you're there. It's obviously a little subjective. We've had to kind of curate things a bit. The Trapsmith goes a little bit of a step further as well in trying to make important upgrades more visible to players. So common feedback we get when people start the game is not even knowing some of these traps exist to begin with. And so we're kind of adding a lot of the traps to more Trapsmiths throughout the game, including some that were previously, or currently anyway, only able to be crafted. We're going to put them in the shops as well for the same costs, as well as streamline some of those costs. And we can kind of show a few examples of that on stream as well. But kind of before we had the capability, long ago, these shops could only sell things for gold. And then we added the ability, well, you can sell it for items as well. And then sort of the difference between crafting and shops, the Venn diagram started to overlap more, right? It's two ways where you can convert items into another item. And the shop has worked a lot better and more in recent areas to be able to make traps and important things more visible. You go to an area, you look at the shop, it's like, oh, look at this cool trap that I can build while I'm here. And so we're kind of embracing that, going with the benefit of hindsight and adding that to a lot of the lower level areas, the early game, mid game areas. Tribal Isles is a huge one, so many crafted traps, and you pretty well have no choice but to check the wiki to figure out, what am I doing, and not even kind of what traps exist, but then how do I make them. The math, look, he brought me some emerald ice cream. I guess the Gilded Coin there, Math, you're still talking about the chat there. It feels like a little scoop of ice cream in the middle to you, I guess. Alex, do you think it will always be the way it has been? I don't know if I have context there, Alex, to answer that question. Swift the Bazaar is even more useless than it already is. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. It is a good spot to pick up the Master Burglar. It does have a fairly minor role in the overall arc of the game, but that's a good example. When that first came out, crafting was introduced when we released Froma. And at the time, travel was a lot more interesting because there weren't as many things in the game. It was a bigger portion of the game. You travel around, and in some ways, because there wasn't so much to learn and keep in your head, it felt kind of nice. You're going out and you're doing your grocery shopping. You're like, oh, I'm gonna go pick up some Burroughs salmon from here and some curds and whey from here and some paint brand paint from there, and that kind of made the world feel a little bit bigger and immersive. But now, as the game's just gotten so big, it's almost just kind of gone into the background as this noise. It becomes more of an annoyance than kind of an interesting thing to remember. Where do I go to get this resource? There's so much more interesting resource management going on in the areas themselves now that I don't think we need that sort of extra cognitive load of having to remember where do I go just to buy some very basic things. No, the mouse, Dave, he bought me some. Oh, yes, I was looking for some sort of merchant-themed mouse that I could put up there. The Stuffy Banker mouse was my first choice, but unfortunately, I, again, did not have a high-resolution, transparent version of that mouse. So I think that is the Spore Salesman above me there from Mousey Pichu. That's the closest I could get to a shop's-themed mouse. Neckard, any chance we can get a rib freebie? Well, stay tuned, there will be trivia. That said, it will most likely not be a rib. In fact, the tool to make the reward links does not include a rib to ensure that mistake cannot happen. Cohort says, just a question, will the craftable skins be available in the Trapsmith? Right now, we've just kind of focused in on traps, although there was a discussion point around things like the grungy Deathbot and the fluffy Deathbot and the ninja ambush that predate trap skins as well. So it's kind of something we're looking at, but right now we focused in just on traps as they're so critical as well to the overall progression of the game. It's interesting, even as new people join the team, it's very nice we've been able to expand the team a bit recently and help get a little bit more done. And as new members of the team join the dev team, whether it's doing art or programming, the fresh eyes of going through it, like, wait, what trap should I be using here? And he goes, oh, use this. I didn't even know that existed, right? And so it's been great feedback, not just from players, but from new devs as they become players, to get fresh eyes and kind of smooth out some of these things. Swift says, any chance we can get a Caloringus tomahawk steak, eh? That's a large portion right there. Just let Franco open his shop in the Bazaar, says Ben. Well, maybe. We'll see you one day. There's a shopkeeper mouse. That was another one I did not have a high resolution asset for as well. I think the tonic salesman I pulled up as well. That one's kind of a fun character. Limbomber says, just some random feedback about Lunar New Year event. Last year's airship skins weren't discounted and still cost 10 candles like the new ones. Absolutely. We've already jotted that down for next year. We had a lot of great Lunar New Year feedback while the event was going on, and during Feedback Friday as well. So that is one thing we did write down. And we'll be looking to maybe move them to the reward track, although against the awkward if you already own them. Might be odd if the reward track is different based on the number of events you've participated in the past. Or make them available. Maybe they cost cheese instead of the candles. Some ideas floated around about having the costumed mice. Every year they each drop one token, and then that's it. And once you get one token from the mouse, you're kind of capped, almost like Advent chocolates in a way, and you can use those to buy previous cosmetics. But again, as the years go by, that may also not scale too well. So anyway, lots of ideas floating around. We definitely logged it. It's in the milestone for the 2023 Lunar New Year event. So we'll definitely take a look when the time gets a little closer. Draco the Wild Bunch does have a shopkeeper. That's kind of the root of the issue. The entire Wild Bunch mouse group does not have high resolution assets. At least we might have to get the artists who illustrated them to export them at high resolution, and we can add them kind of to the code base so we can easily find them. But there's a few of kind of the older mice there that our processes have changed as years have gone by, and now when they export the mice, they'll do different dimensions, and as well as kind of a transparent high resolution one. And it's just nice too if you're putting together a news post, maybe a creative marketing material, an email or something like that. You just, I want a transparent high resolution that then I can resize it any way I need it. Cohort just wonders how much do the shopkeepers earn. That would be certainly interesting to see. I know sometimes when Ronza visits, we'll log how much gold she earns, but not the shopkeepers in general. Yeah, Swift says still not a fan of costing candles. Yeah, absolutely. I think that we'll take a closer look when we put together next year's event, assuming we do the candle event again. And definitely when we get a little closer, that's jotted down, we'll take a look. Gia, any chance to have code to break open your frozen fromage? That is a very old item indeed. JP, hi Dave. Hello to you as well. Yeah, costing cheese is better than candles. You had leftover cheese, but you ran out of candles. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but lots of great feedback for sure. If you're interested as well, not last week, I guess it was the week before. I think we did a whole Feedback Friday on the Lunar New Year event. Got lots of great feedback written down. Eileen says, other than Michelle, are there any other players turned devs? Not that I can think of. I think just Michelle would be the only one. Well, then we can dive in a little bit here, because maybe the easiest way to check this out is to take it for a spin. And I think the top of the game is a little cut off. Is that better? Hey, that's better. Cool. So we'll take this for a spin here. We have this up and running in a test environment where we can take a look at all the shops and some of the changes, and that might paint a better picture of kind of what's going on here. Open to feedback, suggestions as well. Like I said, it's a large update. It has a lot of moving parts. We've had to touch almost every area in the game. And so we're kind of interested in going through there in a fine-tooth comb. And some of the things are kind of subjective as well, where goes what. So I can certainly see, while we're testing it, changing things a little bit. Even when it comes out, I think we'll get tons of feedback as well. And maybe just kind of tune things. You could see maybe an update here or there, a few patch notes. Oh, we moved something to somewhere else. Just kind of, there's so many moving parts. I'm sure a player will point something out once it comes out. You forgot how cheap the portals were now. Yeah, here I am in the laboratory. And even long-term, we're wondering about changing this interface a little bit, but for now we're doing the best with what we got. Where kind of the most relevant traps, even bring them to the top a little bit. Anytime you arrive at an area and there is a trap that you've never seen before, never encountered before, kind of moving it to the top to just highlight it a little bit. And even long term, maybe exploring something around, hey, the laboratory trapsmith, these are their featured traps or their specialty traps, or specials kind of in some ways. Or a new person coming to the lab, they just stand out as like, hey, you've never seen these before, so maybe check them out, learn what they're all about, and maybe that's your next goal. You want to unlock a shadow trap now if you don't have one from an event or something like that. So the laboratory is pretty straightforward. I feel like the Tribal Isles is maybe an area where this really shines. But we'll get maybe into Feroma a little bit. That gold to point ratio, yeah, it's a little obscene, isn't it? Just in this test environment, actually, I wrote a quick little script that loads up all the areas in the game and adds up the gold and the item costs of everything, just to be able to at least buy everything once, for the most part. And some max inventory quantities kind of throw a wrench in that plan a little bit, but yeah, that's why it's an interesting piece of trivia. It's just shy of 800 million gold if you want to buy everything from every shop once. So we'll take a spin into Feroma here. There should be a area related to power type filters, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, kind of we're doing a first pass to do as much as we can with what we have, but the shops for a while now have needed quite a facelift. They could, as we add more things, add some sort of filter. Yeah, absolutely. Like a search even, something like that would be great to see. And you see like the Bamboozler base being sold in more areas. Here I'm in Feroma. The dehydration base has been carried forward as well. So we kind of listed out all the different pieces of equipment in the game. And one of the goals with this is when you're going through the game to help you discover that these things exist and more easily compare kind of like a base that's just below the one that maybe you should have and maybe one that's just above. So you can kind of compare where you've been recently to where you're going a little bit. Manny says 800 million is the price of everything, at least from the shops, yeah. Without item costs. Well, I also have one of every item, so there's just an easy way to load it up and to be in a state where you could buy one of everything, more or less. Not entirely related, but having a prestige base at the top of the base list would be a nice quality life change. Absolutely, and unfortunately it's a little harder than it sounds because of the way it works, but it's something the dev teams kind of, we're aware of and have very long-term plans to try and address that, just kind of as the game has grown, and that's become a very popular reward structure and a popular system of how things can work, where they do a special effect in a certain area or they have very unique functionality, and they kind of outgrew the original framework of the game where your base has stats and those are its stats and they never change. And so as you can imagine, over the course of almost a decade and a half, the number of assumptions in the code base that say, well, the base, this is their stats and they don't change, it's very difficult to kind of update it in a way to remove that assumption. Ryan says, it feels like the ambush trap had more parts than needed than before. That's a very good observation there, Ryan, as well. We've kind of taken the liberty to streamline things a little bit. And so purchasing some traps from the shop and just kind of where the game has ended up over the course of the years, things like the rice paper that you used to have to buy to craft the ambush trap, you just buy it from a shop, right? It only exists so that when you craft it, the trap costs you some gold to build it. And then the next iteration of that is a trap would often need a blueprint that you buy from the shop. And it's just a way of like making the trap cost some sort of gold. And so if you rewind all the way back to, 2008 or 9 or whenever Feroma came out, the shops couldn't sell things for items. So you had to craft the trap. And it's like, well, the trap should cost you some gold to build, right? So we just added things to the shop that cost gold, like rice paper. You had to go and buy the rice paper from the shop. Cool, there's your item, there's your gold cost, because you had to buy that from a shop somewhere. So you can associate that the ambush trap cost you 63,410 gold. So what we've done here is we've taken those out when you buy them from the shop. Now you could still go to the crafting interface and craft the ambush the old school way, no problem whatsoever. But now if you go through the shop, you don't have to go and like do the legwork of just buying these things for the sake of buying them. Like purchasing the ambush trap, you have to do it in like multiple steps. Buy this, and then buy the trap. There's no difference, right? We just take the cost of all that rice paper and we just make it the cost that the trap is in the Trapsmith itself. Swift says, will there be a crafting item purge? For the moment, no. Right now, basically, there would be two ways that you can get the ambush trap and other crafted traps. You could either craft it the way that you could before, or you can buy it from the Trapsmith. That said, some of the general stores have been updated to remove some things. that are no longer relevant. You no longer need them, but the crafting recipe remains behind almost as kind of a grandfathered way. If somebody, let's say, was right in the middle of crafting something, they're just waiting on one last loot drop, they can still go about crafting it. But the general store, some items will be removed, as well as sort of the going forward, the new expected way most people will get these traps is through the Trapsmith. KDM says there's no more trap crafting from now on, cries in Dragon Slayer canon. There's a few notable exceptions, and the Dragon Slayer canon is still one. It is still in the general, or the Trapsmith still gives you a hint at how you craft it yourself, but that has a nice narrative as well. It has a strong theme of like, why am I crafting? It's like I'm discovering a new piece of hunting equipment for the very first time. Jenna says, I don't like max inventory quantity. Why can't you get 2 bases or traps? Fair enough. It has more pros than cons, I guess. Often people accidentally buy 2 traps, and then they kind of reach out a little bit upset if you can't refund it, especially if it's something that costs items. So it's just kind of a nice way. Some things that you just don't need 2 of. There's no practical reason why you would need 2 ambush traps or 2 bamboozler bases. You're just kind of limited to 1, and that's kind of, yep, you own it, you have it. And you can't accidentally buy 2. Then Bomber says it would be cool to suggest empowered Super Brie whenever Super Brie is the suggested cheese. That should kind of work, I would hope. But the suggestion system's a little muddy as well. It's kind of on the long-term list of things that need quite the extensive overhaul. You can see the Onyx Mallet as well. That's a good example of something that was crafted. As well as taking the chance, off the top of my head, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure we lowered the number of onyx stones that you need to build the mallet. I think it used to be closer to 12. Don't quote me on that. But there are definitely some traps in the update as well where they're going to become not as expensive. Perhaps most notably is if we go over to the train, the Nanian Express, those traps will become quite a bit cheaper. So they've had their material costs dramatically reduced. Similarly in Claw Shot, the Fool's Gold cost of the Slack, I believe, has been lowered quite a bit as well. But a lot of things just are starting to show their age a little bit. I think we've mentioned on previous Feedback Fridays as well. When the game was a lot younger, we kind of approached a lot of areas as though this was sort of the end-all be-all, or this was like the epic final, one of the most challenging endgame areas. And so a lot of these rewards were kind of designed to be stretch goals. It's like, well, you're expected to just spend a lot of time to go and get these things. But as the years have gone by, we've gotten better at separating those out and being more intentional of these are kind of above and beyond. You're not really expected to get them to be able to move on to the next area, whereas these are a little bit more expected. Hey, you're supposed to kind of get these because without them, you're going to be underpowered in the next area. And so a lot of these cost adjustments are just smooth out that curve. Like right now, the costs kind of go all over the place. And it's just, there's a trap that's just expensive for the sake of being expensive, because that's how we did it years ago. But it just doesn't withstand the test of time as a new player comes through this playing from scratch. They get to a point where it's like, I just can't afford that trap. I will level up twice before I possibly can earn that much gold. And so the pacing is just very awkward and weird and just not fun, basically, as being the root issue of it. It's, hey, I need this trap to move to the next area, but I have no choice. I got to sit here for weeks just grinding gold, and that's not as fun as moving on to the next adventure. Now there's so much more interesting and varied content in the game. Ryan says, I like how Dave has 10 Venus mouse traps. The Venus mouse trap is a bit of a head scratcher as well there, but definitely it's involved in its many different iterations. So when that script was putting together, one of everything I need to buy one of everything, you need a lot of Venus mouse traps to buy all the various kind of variations on that trap. Limbomber says, I could never save up for Slack 2 at Fort Rocks. You need the 300 Fool's Gold. Cohort, I imagine how hard it will be for new players compared to us with a couple tiers. For sure, it's something we're sensitive to as well. Like, you don't want to diminish previous accomplishments, but you also need to be able to recognize at some points where a new player coming through, quite frankly, they just quit. It's just too hard, right? It's just out of whack. And I think it doesn't have the same issue when it's the newest thing. And I think that's why that bad kind of pattern developed as we're putting out areas years ago. when it's the newest thing, everyone has a lot of patience for it because it's brand new, right? And there's something exciting about everyone's all doing the same thing at the same time. You have more appetite to like, yeah, I'm going to spend 3 months in doing this because all my friends are doing it and it's new, it's challenging, there's lots to learn and discover and explore. But once it's like 6 years old, it just doesn't have that same level of enthusiasm, and so it kind of needs to be a little bit quicker and to the point, because you're setting your sights on much more interesting long-term goals, like reaching the floating islands, or getting to the Valor Rift is a more interesting long-term goal than saving up gold to buy the death bot. And so there's so much. In some ways, it's very complementary. There's just so much more interesting and fun things to do in the game, that some of the things that used to be fun and interesting are kind of not fun and interesting anymore as someone joins the game for the first time. Eileen's looking at her 12 gingerbread bases. Anon says, a great man told me you can always go more epic. Absolutely. I know that's a popular expression Jacob has as well. Stale Super Brew Plus for the enraged Rhino bot. Go take a spin over the Tribal Isles. That's an area that's benefited quite a bit from this as well. So you used to have to chill out in Cape Claude. Basically, that was sort of the shop location. You see, it's gotten a little bit of an update. The Molten Shrapnel base makes an appearance. It's a night level base. And again, without kind of following a strategy guide, there's no way in the game to see that base even exists to begin with. Some other little things we're doing here to help out some newer players as well is a few of the, now we haven't added them to all of them, but we've kind of picked some of the important ones as we go through here. Hints at, where do I go to find this thing? And now you can start to imagine a flow. Okay, somebody who doesn't have a friend who's been playing for years, who doesn't read a strategy guide, the wiki, or is asking questions on the Discord server, they get here and they go, okay, oh, look, this Molten Shrapnel base. Hey, this is better than the base I have. Maybe I want to go and get this. Where do I get scrap metal? Okay, that's where I can go to find some scrap metal. What the heck is a Dragon Ember, right? And now you don't have to Google MouseHunt Dragon Ember to figure that out. There's more things in the game to help you more easily discover, well, where do I go to get this? How do I go about getting it? And the more interesting thing, maybe you're going to use the wiki, a strategy guide, or you're going to collaborate on Discord and discuss what's the best way to do it versus just what am I supposed to be doing, if that makes sense. I feel like the game needs to get better at highlighting what you can be doing and what there is to do and how to go about doing it, but not necessarily what's the best way to do that. That kind of falls into the realm of strategy and collaboration and discussion. And I think that's kind of fun to discuss with friends and fellow players, is like, well, what's the best way to go about doing that? But at least the game gives you some signals about, okay, well, where can you go to do this? And then from there, you're on your own, figure it out. But KDM says 50 scrap metals. What happened to the 200 that we used to have to farm for months back then? Exactly. That's another example of something that's just been made more in line with the amount of time you spend during night. So it's just a little bit silly that here's this base that has a night requirement and it has 8 luck and 350 power, and you will spend so long collecting all that scrap metal that you will no longer be a knight by the time you can afford it, and there's just a better base you can be using now. It just doesn't make any sense. But if you kind of rewind the clock, when that base was released, it was one of the better bases in the game, and there weren't too many people much higher than knight. Well, that might be a bit of a stretch, but knight was kind of considered the end game, and so it kind of made sense that, well, here's this above and beyond base. It's a stretch goal. But now it just doesn't make any sense because, like I said, by the time somebody collects all that scrap metal, they won't be a knight, and odds are there's a better base that now they can buy. And it's like, well, I don't know. I outgrew the Molten Shrapnel base before I could even collect everything needed to make it. That thing, why does it even exist? It's pretty pointless. And that might be one of the better examples of something being made hard just for the sake of being made hard. I don't think anyone sat down and said, is it fun to collect 200 scrap metal? Maybe at the time when it's brand new and everyone's all doing the same thing at the same time, it is fun, but definitely did not withstand the test of time. And now new hunters coming through this, like, 200 scrap metal. What's going on there? What's the deal with that? Dallas says, this tour is giving me nostalgia feels. Absolutely. Caloringus rib hint. Good luck. Yeah, absolutely. More time during events so everyone can get the rewards, says Trevor there. Ice, what will happen to the Dragon Slayer cannon crafting? That is being left just the way it is. So let's go for a spin on over to Queso Geyser. The lanterns need to be removed from the map. I think I spotted that yesterday as well. The spirit of Lunar New Year is still alive in the map image. And I've already made it, but that's being left basically the way it is. And this narrative of this mysterious, amazing draconic trap that you need to help the Trapsmith discover the way to build it, and you craft it yourself. But, you know, if we were to kind of use crafting, that might be an example of a better way to do it. Having more sort of gamified ways to go about discovering, well, like, how does this thing work? How do I put this together? Rather than just being a mystery that basically you Google it. That's the only way you can possibly know how to build that. Having a few more things in game that at least make it feel like a mystery you're uncovering, gamify it, and make it a fun experience rather than just hoping for the best, basically. Samuel says, will there be buffs for these old bases? Would love a 10 luck on the spellbook base. A few things have had their stats adjusted as well. Just, again, with the benefit of hindsight, being able to go back and look at all the equipment, look at its title requirements, and kind of smooth out the upgrade curve quite a bit. I know the death bot's been kind of tweaked a little bit. The Digby drill bot, I believe, has had its stats changed. And so a lot of changes to costs and stats, again, just smooth things out. If something has the requirement of journeyman, there should be at least a reasonable way that a journeyman can purchase that trap before they level up. Otherwise, what's the point? Then they may as well just save up for the next trap. It's it's too expensive to the point where it's not an interesting decision. It's just, don't buy this, because by the time you can afford it, there's a better trap and you can afford that one instead. You know? So mostly just pacing things. But, you know, for the most part, it's been affecting kind of the early and the mid game. The late game, kind of as we changed our design philosophies quite a bit, got a little bit better at our craft as well. Those are already kind of pretty smooth. I think probably the Sunken City is about as high as we've been touching. Although I don't think that's in this environment, but we kind of got some feedback to lower the cost of the title base, so that won't be as many sand dollars as well. Lynn used the magma base for so long. It was your go-to base. Yeah, there's not too many bases, surprisingly enough. Eh? There's lots of traps, but not as many bases. East Old says, I absolutely love this game, and I've been playing for 12 years now. You love and wish there was more plank run journal entries or just more lore bit scat through. Absolutely. Me as well. Or I as well. And I think a lot of people on the team as well kind of hope for that. But it's just a matter of hadn't quite had time. Plank run's pages definitely need just a big overhaul. And like just to see more, even just grander arcs, and even have the storyline of one area lead into the next where it's kind of concluded. Something we kind of started at the beginning, but as the game has kind of gone on, unfortunately, it was something we just don't have enough time to pick back up on. Swift says, what happens to the old LE crafting traps like Cackle Lantern? They just stay the way they are, right? You can't get them anymore anyway. It's kind of no sense doing anything with them because they're kind of the way they were. Generic Potato says, we unironically need to do a good luck option as a crafting item hint. Like I said, it's not all the items. We've gone through and mostly focused on the early to the mid game, kind of where we see a lot of players have trouble figuring out how to play the game. And that's not a good thing for anybody, right? That's not healthy for the game as well. You need a good influx of new players coming through the game because it's a multiplayer game and it's most fun when you play with others. So it's very important that as new people come into the game, we can kind of see where are they getting stuck? Where can they not figure things out? Can kind of, based on feedback and kind of looking at that, can smooth those things out a little bit. And it's obviously just some of the pacing is quite a bit off from where it started. Court says, I always wonder, the prestige base seems to be the end game base. Do you plan on getting a chrome kit for any old base? No plans at the moment. Poor MH Wiki people. We've reached out for sure. They actually have access to this test environment as well. There's quite a few of the great wiki editors as well. Michelle made sure to invite them to this environment because there's going to be obviously quite a few changes to equipment and where you get it, how much it costs, and the stats. Tarako asks, when is this update coming? That's a good segue as well into just kind of testing. No definitive release date yet. We're testing it out, and we've invited a few players to come and preview it and give us some feedback. And as well, we kind of slowly opening that up to more and more people as well. And I'll share the sign up link on Feedback Friday here as well before the end of the stream. And make sure I remember to do that. I'll post it toward the end though a little bit because it's kind of a forum. So maybe on the way out, I'll leave a link. Maybe when we do the trivia, that'll be a good reminder. And you'll be able to access this test environment we have in email inbox set up for kind of feedback, bug reports. The Discord admins have been very nice as well, helping set up a channel on the Discord where people with that role can chat about the update as well, kind of collaborate, answer some quick questions, that sort of thing. So we're looking to open that up to kind of more and more hunters over the course of a few weeks. We're kind of hoping that maybe within 2 to 3 weeks it'll be looking pretty good, but that said, it'll come out when it's ready. It's like I said, it's a big update. We don't want to rush it. We want to make sure we kind of put it through its paces, get lots of feedback on it, and test it as well. The opportunity to kind of do a data entry error and it all blows up is quite high with this one. So we definitely have to put it through the magnifying glass and look through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Swift says, I don't think the crafting items should be removed from the shops. There should be a way to obtain them still. Yeah, I mean, fair enough too. In the patch notes, will kind of outline things quite a bit. But that said, there would be some things in the general store, they just have no purpose anymore. And so in a way, they've been kind of retroactively changed, right? The history of the game and the story has changed. And it's like that item no longer exists because that's not how you obtain that trap anymore. Your super brief failed to attract. I think because I'm hunting with it in the geyser. That's not going to go too well. And I'm using a rhino bot. That's not going to go too well either. I don't know where else would be a good spot to kind of take a look at the Trapsmith. Here, let's get a better trap going. There we go. Victory is ours. We captured a skeleton. Catacombs is a fairly good example as well. You have the Obelisk of Slumber. Slight change as well. The Obelisk of Incineration, previously crafted. You'd have to smash your Obelisk of Slumber to get some Obelisk parts, and then craft it with some scrap metal and coal to make the Obelisk of Incineration. I think this has had its cost adjusted as well. Coal and scrap metal are kind of a big one as well to highlight a hint for as well. Some changes here where when you go to purchase the trap to just, again, avoid a complete unnecessary step, you just spend the trap. You don't have to smash it to get the parts and then go spend the parts at the Trapsmith. It's just an unnecessary step where you'd have to buy this. Otherwise the flow is, hey, I got 5 of these. Hold on. You'd have to buy this, go to your hammer and smash it, come back to the shop and then spend it here. It's kind of, it's a little bit of busy work that gets in the way of just purchasing the trap. The LB Jr. asks, is this a mobile or a PC game? Well, welcome. I take it you're not a mouse hunter. It is both. You can play from your browser at mousehuntgame.com, or if you search MouseHunt on the App Store or Google Play, there's a mobile app as well. Jonathan says, have you taken a look at recipe unlock requirements? Some of them are absurdly high. Zocor traps come to mind. We're not adjusting any of the requirements on their own. Some of them are being removed, though, as sort of the expected way of building some of these traps will be through the Trapsmith now. So that kind of smooths that out as well. It's a bit of a safety net, if you will, or a way to kind of try and gamify discovering that these things exist and go about, if you don't have a strategy guide, a wiki, and a big cheat sheet right next to you, how do I know how to build the Minotaur base? There's a bit of a riddle, I guess, in the blueprints. But then beyond that, there's at least something like, well, if I go do this, the game will tell me how to do it. Cool. Reminds you when you join the V3 Longtail. I think we did quite an open beta for that as well. The space will be a little bit limited. It's going to remain as a closed beta. Just the testing server isn't the largest server in the world, so it can't house too many people. As well as, we have to kind of be cognizant of slowly introducing more people as the confidence in the update builds. It just makes communication a lot easier. When there's a lot of kind of small bugs to iron out, issues to go and feedback to pour through. It's easier to kind of have a conversation with fewer people to start and then expand that conversation over time as we kind of gets a little bit more solid and reduce the number of kind of duplicate bug reports you get and that sort of thing. So like I said, though, I'll share a link toward the end of stream, but unfortunately I imagine not, we just have limited capacity, so I don't think everyone who signs up will be able to join. Ryan asks, any updates regarding the birthday events? The cheese packs that we were talking about last Feedback Friday. I don't have anything right in front of me to say with great certainty, but it's coming along well. The team working on the birthday events been doing a great job. Franco and Chris have kind of been taking point on that. They've been doing great work. And it's almost wrapped up. Looks like next week will be a little bit of a chill week in terms of birthday work. Writing some patch notes and kind of playing through everything one more time, that sort of thing. But it's taken shape pretty well. Generic Potato asks, how about keeping the Bazaar with all the crafting items for now? People that desperately want to use the crafting rope will still have a way to do so then. We can go check out what the Bazaar looks like right now. Yeah, so there's still quite a few things there. And again, it was a little bit of a difficult kind of ball of yarn to unravel, if you will, because changing one thing affects other things, But hey, they're all still there, and a lot of them are sticking around if there's an opportunity for someone to kind of be right in the middle of crafting something, and all of a sudden you kind of take away an ingredient and you can't do it anymore. Now, long term, we anticipate we'll remove those crafting recipes from the game and sort of close the loop there. Kind of there'd be a grandfathering period or a legacy period where you can still craft these things, but then it sort of consolidates everything and kind of changes the history of the game retroactively, if you will. It's like, well, no, we're kind of assuming this is the way it's always been. And the Bazaar keeps some purpose. Well, the Bazaar is a stopping point to get the Master Burglar, to get the Crown Jewel, so you can do the King's Gauntlet, should you be interested in doing so. And it's the only place to get the King's Floor Gauntlet plan at the moment, so and repair these map pieces. We need a bead. Was that for the Obelisk of Slumber? You just buy that from the Trapsmith. And that's a good example as well. So let's go back to the Catacombs. All right, so that's another example of something that had an intermediary step here. So the bead is gone. And I believe the bead used to just cost gold, so it's just been put into the cost of the obelisk on its own. So you just buy it like a normal trap, whereas before you would have to buy the bead. Or I think that was just to recreate your Obelisk of Slumber should you smash it and want to put it back together. But now you spend the trap to buy the Obelisk of Incineration, which is a lot more straightforward. You can't accidentally smash the trap and then realize I don't have coal and scrap metal, and then you got to be able to put the trap back together. So that's kind of one benefit of this route as well. It's very transparent. You can't kind of get halfway through making a trap and realize that you're not going to be able to successfully complete making the trap. And so it's just a lot less confusing. You can't kind of, step on a rake and the handle hits your face and mess something up that way. A little more forgiving. Will those items still exist, or will they be gone from the code? I imagine they'll linger around. They may need their descriptions updated, but that's kind of pinned for a future update as well, and all kind of subject to feedback as well. It would probably be difficult to delete the items because they're in players' inventories, and just deleting items from the game has a few technical challenges. We've certainly done it in the past, but we always have to be very careful when we do it, basically. It's not set up in a way to make it easy to delete an item. A lot of assumptions and things stick around assuming that thing exists. Someone might have bought thousands of beads of slumbers years ago. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. We have to handle that on a bit of a case-by-case basis. And if a lot of people were in that situation, maybe a temporary cash out. That says some things like blueprints that have been removed from shops. You're going to be able to smash them with the Hunter's Hammer to receive a refund, basically. So you can either, hey, if you just want nostalgia and look at this blueprint that you can no longer get, sure. Otherwise, you can use your hunter's hammer and get back the gold or the items. I think some of the living garden blueprints, you can smash them to get your essences back. But there's so many permutations, to be honest. I can't even keep them all floating in my short-term memory. But let's check out the living garden. Then Bomber, I think the travel screen should have all the areas expanded by default because you find it easier to remember the specific place you want to travel to instead of the larger region. Yeah, for sure, especially as more regions and areas get out of the game. That's another thing. It's just hard to memorize. Much like as more areas get in the game, it became too hard to memorize where do I go to buy what, and that's what this update looks to address. I might suggest a search box as well as a great way to maybe alleviate that a little bit, where you could just start typing the name of the area you want to go. We're in the cheese shop. One note, this is kind of a bit of a technical challenge here, is these like packs of cheese. There's some areas as well where we're leaving the cheese as crafted. It's not getting the same treatment as, hey, you can go to the cheese shop to buy them, because we have a few technical challenges surrounding buying the same item for more than one unique type of cost, as well as buying items in quantities more than one. Everywhere you see something where you buy a pack and stuff like that, it's a workaround is in place. And so expanding that to every area in the game, unfortunately, has a few technical hiccups that we can't do that. Here's another good example, though, the soiled base being available in the shop. You'll still be able to craft it, though. I think we've updated this a little bit, though. I think some things have been taken out of the Book of Living Recipes as 20 recipes. I think there used to be more than that, if I recall. This one doesn't have a hint. That would be very helpful as well. But the Phantasmic Oasis as well, that used to have a blueprint that you would make, if I'm not mistaken, out of E, F, and I essence. So if you do have that blueprint, you should be able to smash it and receive back your essences. And then kind of going forward, the expected way that players will build this trap is to go with the Trapsmith and spend this the essences and spend this trap rather than having to smash it and craft it yourself. Kind of a similar treatment happening here for a lot of the other traps as well. Goo asks, will the new area be released this year? Getting kind of bored of hunting the floating islands. Yeah, fair enough. It's coming along well. As also, I'll probably have a little bit more to share in the coming weeks or months as it kind of comes together. But definitely it's going to be several months of work to kind of finish pulling things together. But lots of great work going into that as well. One of the newer artists on the team, Liz, has done a fantastic job kind of mocking up and rendering out parts of the HUD already. But there's a lot. It's going to involve 3 interconnected areas. You can almost feel similar size, and I mean, I don't want to make any unfair comparisons or inaccurate ones. A little bit like Queso Canyon, how it kind of had the river, the plains, and the quarry, and they're all kind of loosely connected, and they all have their own resources to collect, and they all lead to something bigger. And so kind of a similar vibe going on there. So you can imagine it's a little bit of a larger release to kind of kickstart this new region and storyline and get a good baseline of interesting resources that you can start building up. Ash says, I don't want Crown Jewel, I want Adorned Empyrean Jewel. Fair enough. Hey, one's just a kingdom instead of an entire empire, Lynn says, you do lose a little bit of lore by losing the ingredients. It was cool to see all the parts of the ambush trap, and you can see the paper, wooden droids, and the finished product. Absolutely. And there's a little bit of nostalgia surrounding that as well, and that feeling of like, I made this thing. But I think we accomplish it in more interesting ways in newer areas. So I don't think we're losing too much there. And the pros outweigh the cons so much. When we watch new players go through the game, they just don't find that these traps exist. They can't discover them. And just seeing that we have already a very well-working, great feedback mechanism of the Trapsmith, it just makes sense to go down that route than explore some sort of like crafting helper or like expand the recipe book and make it even more complicated. Or have like suggested recipes in areas, highlight that better, or almost like an adventure book that's just dedicated to helping you craft these things. Rather than add more complexity, just leverage an existing relatively simplistic system that new players understand well enough. We're hoping those is just a big boon to kind of how new players go about learning that these things exist and how they go about progressing through the game as well. And ultimately, having more fun to help reach some of the more interesting areas and the more recent areas in the game. Grant says you can have the Bazaar buy back old crafting items but not sell them. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the shop functionality to only have things refund, but maybe some, recycler interface or something might work well. But we're kind of pinning that for a future update anyway. We're kind of just focused on getting the shops all updated with the new things in there, and then kind of taking care of sunsetting some legacy items and all that kind of down the road a little bit once the dust settles and kind of get some good feedback, because it'll require quite an extensive audit again of like, okay, these are all the affected items, these ones are basically being retired, what is their sort of worth, if you can recycle them into something, if you want to get rid of them, or some filter in the inventory, you could tuck them away because they won't have any purpose. Limbomber, I think I already read that. Am I scrolled up in the chat? No, I'm not. I'm just completely lost as usual. Anon says, that's too bad. You love crafting. It's a lot more satisfying, even if it's not as convenient. We're still keeping some crafting around for sure. But, when you think about it, it's the exact same thing via a different interface, right? And the vast majority of crafting happens through the recipe book. And the recipe book is basically this interface right here, right? You need all these things. Go. Buy it. And so just in some ways it's kind of redundant, especially when we see just so many players getting lost in that, not figuring it out, and it's kind of hurting the game in the long term. So we're hoping this will have a lot more benefits than harm. Hermione says, you remember when ship blueprints cost so much yet you could just loot it. The ship is definitely another one as well that just is hard for the sake of being hard. And they're definitely looking to kind of smooth that out a little bit, make it more an appropriate challenge for that stage of the game. If you want a little bit of trivia as well, we rewind all the way back to leading up to the Tribal Isles. We thought the Dragon Mouse, I think I've shared this anecdote many a time before, we thought the Dragon Mouse was going to be the last mouse we ever add to the game, and at that point we would move on and make a new game, because who's going to make it that far? If you go back further than that, when we added the Deathbot, we thought, maybe one or two people will be, dedicated enough to save up for the Deathbot, but it's like bragging rights. Hey, I made it. I beat the game. I bought the Deathbot, the last trap. Obviously, we were very wrong, and the design philosophy has shifted dramatically over the years, where we kind of make no assumptions about the lifehood of the game, and we say this thing, we design everything as though it's going to go on forever, and so all the challenges kind of need to be paced to be appropriate for that title. If you have 10 different things to accomplish while you're a Duke, it's a little bit odd if you spend the entire time doing just one of them, assuming they're all very core to your progression. Otherwise, you end up, you're an Archduke and you're still like figuring out something in the fungal cavern. Like the pacing is just off there, right? So kind of going back and smoothing that out, making the pacing make a lot more sense for each title. Matt says, what about the King's Bubbly? Will that be affected in any way? Well, let's go check it out. I know the Whiskerwood shops have been updated a little bit. I don't know if changes to the shop or the ship made it into this. I'm going to start with the Trapsmith. You can kind of see the Venus mouse trap and its iterations showing up. Radioactive sludge. There's even new devs would be asked, where do I get this stuff? And the bubbly is still there and it is 210k. I think we were changing some drops in the Hydra, though, to kind of smooth things out. A few of the mice as well. Even adjusting some of the difficulties of things to try and make it so it's a more reasonable goal that you can achieve during that title. Again, some things were hard for the sake of being hard, and the pacing just didn't feel right anymore now that you're play through the game from scratch, and you're just spinning your wheels. You're just not making any progress, and you're leveling up, and you haven't finished everything that you had to do at that level. Yeah, sure. It says, I feel like this loses a lot of flavor. Fair enough. That's something we're cognizant of as well. There's definitely, I think there's a little bit of a touch of nostalgia. And, when things are different, they feel different, right? And they're not the way you remember them. And that can kind of take a little bit of wind out of the sails here and there. And so, it's something we're aware of as we kind of put things together. But that said, as we've experimented and in the newer areas, just kind of doing this, and it's well received. And the feedback is positive, and we see more players figure out how to do things. It's like, well, I think that's a better direction to go into. And so, sometimes it hurts a little bit to have to go back and change things that we're used to them working in a certain way. But, so we don't take it lightly. We put a lot of thought into it, and we're hoping that the game is better off for it. And ultimately, that makes the game better for even players who've been playing for 14 years. It's good that there's more players coming in, kind of new ranks, new hunters coming up the ranks and sticking around and playing. The larger the community grows, the more fun the game is, because it is truly more fun when you play with others. So it says I better sell all my arcane crystals, eh? Yeah, let's go pop into the living garden and see if they're still for sale. I think they're going to still be sticking around. Obviously, too, we'll give a heads up before we're removing things. I think the crystals are probably still around, yeah. So you can definitely sell back your crystals. And like I said, there's going to be this transition period where you can both craft and purchase them from the shop, and we'll phase out the crafting recipes at a future date, yet to be determined. And so we're kind of saving all that mental energy and that auditing until this is kind of wrapped up and it's out in the wild, kind of get some feedback, let the dust settle, make a few adjustments. I'm sure once it's out, we'll have plenty of feedback and probably want to tune a few things more. But we'll definitely give a heads up, like, hey, this is coming 3 weeks from now. This is what's going to happen. So, if you're sitting on a whole bunch of these, please sell them now. Or I don't know, maybe we make the Hunter's Hammer be able to smash it back into gold. So there's at least some way retroactively. Or hey, if we have the time and the capability to do so, some special interface you can load up. And it's just like, well, here's all these phased out crafting items and a button that you can push to just convert them all back into gold, or go one at a time and choose what you want to do. I think there's lots of potential solutions. Not saying that's the plan, but it's one option available as well to consider. Jay, hey Dave, like the updates, any plans to update donation items for older areas? Most of them feel underwhelming in terms of value. Yeah, absolutely, that as well. Kind of, it's in the backlog to go through and add. Just update the premium shop a lot for older areas is something, kind of we haven't prioritized over the years. We've been focused on adding new areas and new content, but, it's definitely something that needs to be done. And that's kind of where the team has grown in size a little bit. It's helped tremendously. More people can take ownership over more things. And that's often the best way to push things through is everyone kind of needs to develop those expertise around a kind of a certain area or of development or a certain part of the game. And then just kind of, take ownership over it. So you always kind of, it's something on that person's mind, because no one person can kind of juggle all that stuff simultaneously. So, no concrete plans of when that would happen. Another goal we have is the kind of those limited quantity purchases are quite popular with players as well. So going back and kind of adding some of those just permanently to areas is like, hey, when you arrive at the Tribal Isles for the first time, here's just something to kind of help you out here is something we've been looking into as well. Tarako Swifty, arcane crystals are your bank accounts where you hide your gold so you don't spend it. You don't go with the also popular Swiss bank account, buy a whole bunch of Swiss cheese, and then sell it back when you need. That's a good way. It's almost like tucking it away. It's like tucking it away into a little retirement account or something. It's like, don't touch this. And I say, it's not in your checking account. I'm moving it into my Swiss savings account. Jonathan, it might be possible to have an inventory view that shows everything. Many things can be crafting items and thus only show inventory crafting. That's another thing in the backlog, is just taking this very dated inventory that just doesn't make sense in 2023 anymore, as we've added so many different things. There are so many items in the game and systems. You almost need to approach it more like this is your player's satchel, or it's like your bank. You can organize it the way you want. You can kind of just do a global search to find the thing you're looking for. And even if this is very, very long term, we want to kind of phase out the whole idea of this is a crafting item, right? This is very awkward the way you look through your crafting items. You have to load this table. But even moving away where Rift Mist, we don't denote it as a crafting item. It's an item in the game which can be crafted with. But again, that's a very long-term change we're looking into, because we run into some bottlenecks. This is getting a little bit like behind-the-scenes development challenges here. But if I go to the river, got arm. Cheese, that makes sense. You got arm of cheese. Just like seeing the header illustration, if nothing else. If you go to the river, you can make these cheese using bland queso. Now, you might notice this is a little bit out of character, right? Because I'm crafting, but I'm crafting with a cheese. I'm not crafting with something that's a crafting item. So as the game has evolved, it's become apparent that we don't want items that their only purpose is to facilitate crafting, we want items which can be crafted with, and they might be able to be armed as cheese and they can be used on the crafting table. So again, very long-term goal we have to help make that transition, because this is a pretty big workaround to be able to get bland queso to be able to be crafted with. I know when we're putting it together, we explored something like they dropped liquid queso and you'd have to craft bland queso out of liquid queso. But it's just, it felt like such an unnecessary step. Well, it wouldn't just be nice if you upgrade your cheese into better cheese. So. Clement says, please keep a vintage box to show some of the then useless items. That might be a fun idea to explore as well. Swift says, is there a Monolith Base buff? You know what? Let's open up the spreadsheet here. If I can. I believe the Monolith Base is getting a buff, but for now, though, it is remaining as dropped by the big bad burrows. We hope at one future magical day we can revise the town in Anya, or town of Digby, sorry, to have a much more interesting adventure and more interesting gameplay. And we might want to tie that base into the reward structure of that adventure. Bases, let me see here. Monolith Base. Yes, the Monolith Base is having its power increased to 500. And again, kind of goes both smoothing out the progression curve in terms of cost. Like if something has a specific title requirement, for the most part, not all traps, some of them are designed to be stretch goals. But those sort of traps that you're very much so expected, I should have this trap to move on to the next area, trying to get it fit more in line with something you can reasonably earn before you like level up 4 more times, if you know what I mean. But same as well, power levels as well. Some things were a little underpowered for their title, or they were superfluous. There was kind of a period we added things for the sake of adding it, not knowing that the game would keep going on for as long as it has. And so it's been nice retroactively going back and plotting things into where they make sense. One of the newer devs, Jake, on the team as well, has been quite instrumental. He's done a great job just auditing all these items. I'm blown away at how quickly he's picked up just almost 15 years of MouseHunt minutia and trivia, and to get context behind all these items, where you get them, how you build them. It really has revealed just how complex things have grown over a decade plus. Cohort, the game's been fantastic. You made a couple of friends while it was on Facebook, and it's been 5 years. We've shared some stuff more than game related. You actually talk with each other, really fun. Hey, that's great to hear. That's the great part about multiplayer games. Like I said, it's fun playing with other people because it's a way to bond, make new friends, and share experiences. Please keep a search function in the friends items. It's there in mobile, not the main web. I don't know if I quite follow you there. Yeah, +1 on filters, yeah. I really like the idea the arcane crystal is made out of 2.5 mil gold when you smash it. Yeah, it might be a bit of a narrative shift. Even it's a bit of a kind of a good enough solution right now, kind of considering where things are long term. They're kind of going to phase out of existence. So kind of how much effort we go into putting together a way to exchange these things out. But the Hunter's Hammer was just there, right? So it's a very quick and easy way for us to make sure, even though a shop doesn't let you sell it back, you can convert it into another item. Kind of has that mechanic of I can turn one item into another. But yeah, it's a bit of a narrative letdown, especially like blueprints. You smash them into gold, but like that's kind of just to facilitate a need more than it is to add to the experience, because you'll do it once and then you'll never be able to do it again. So it's kind of a one-off. On that note, we should maybe shift gears to the trivia question for this week, because it is already noon. We've been going for an hour. How did that happen? And this week's trivia question, speaking of shops, is what was the very first area to have a general store? We put on the creepy trivia music. Don't know if that played. I didn't hear it myself. I believe Swift is first with the correct answer. The Bazaar was the very first area to have a general store. I mean, honorable mention to Dojo, because it led into the Dojo. Harbor. Swift, you fell for the trap, because the Harbor is the very first game you encounter that may have a general store in the area. But historically, it was not the first to receive one as an update. It is indeed the Bazaar. It was in November 2008 Time is passing. 14 years ago almost, the idea of a general store and crafting was added. And, you know, it just kind of speaks to the point as well. There's things designed almost 14 years ago. And as you can imagine with anything in life, you'd probably do it a little bit. Things you did 14 years ago, you'd probably do them a little bit different now if you've been practicing it for 14 years. So just some systems need to grow up with the game as well. You know, they need to grow, change, and evolve as the game changes. So it's been great. Like I said, we have a little bit more extra bandwidth, more people on the team to kind of roll up their sleeves and take a look at some of these things that have been long neglected and need an update for so long. I'll put the link in the chat for your clicking convenience if nobody beats me to it. It is there for your clicking convenience. Carl, oh well, you started March 2009, so you weren't there at the time. That was pretty well almost at the start. What was it? March 2008. So I can still remember that Chrome update coming out, and you know, just even can recall just you know how green we all were. You know, we're just recently converted web developers and trying to figure out how to make a game, right? So as you can imagine, we probably made some wacky choices back then. Thanks for another rib, Dave. Yep, there you go. There's a rib in that link. No, just kidding. That's impossible. But Kuman in Discord just laughing. Dave rambles on. Also, Dave, how's it already an hour? Yep, thank you. Yep. Watch out. You get me talking, I'll ramble forever. Those wacky choices are charming. You know, absolutely. I mean, some of them, you know, some of them are a-okay, and some of them have some nice nostalgia to them as well. And just maybe they just need a little polish more than to be completely changed. But you remember the Terrible Twos mouse being introduced? That was a fun event as well. No, maybe that was the third. I'm thinking of the third birthday. Where we added kind of each week a new kind of boss mouse, if you will, was added to the game. And that's when the Big Bad Burrows was introduced, the Dojo Sensei, and the Sylph, I believe. And I think we even had a little scoreboard for the week, like who could capture the most of that mouse that week. And it shows how far events have come. You know, one of the very first events was probably, I don't know if it would have been Halloween, but it was basically the Hollow Head mouse can be encountered in all locations, and when you capture, drops some loot. That was it. And how far we've come in events now where they have their own dedicated area, reward structure, unique mouse characters that kind of play different roles and loot drops and everything. It's just kind of, you can see how far the game has come since then. Very best says, would it be possible to have a double amplifier charm for the seasonal garden to make it less dull to enter the tower for higher level players? There is an amplifier charm. You can pick it up at the King's Arms, so it's pretty good use of your King's credit if you're looking to double that up. Yeah, Swift, that's the second. Yeah, the Terrible Twos mouse was the second birthday, which makes sense, obviously, being a two-year-old mouse. But, you know, a good example as well, not kind of thinking, well, we're going to have a power type that'll never have any use ever again. But, you know, if you think the game will only be around for a couple of years, it's not that big of a deal. But 14 years down the road, it's kind of like, what is this thing? What do I do with this? Why doesn't it have any sort of use or purpose whatsoever? So it's always kind of nice now when we're putting things in, we kind of think ahead a little bit of like, oh, where is this going to go? You know, trying to think a few steps ahead rather than just kind of thinking about what's going to go in next. And that'll be that. The ultimate amplifier charm that charges instantly at the cost of one ultimate charm. Oh boy, I don't know if I would do that. No, but it is even just kind of great suggestions to lean into that. I don't know if we'd, when or if we'd ever kind of overhaul the garden and the tower. It is in need of a little bit of love. It's kind of a bit of an older area now and has some rough edges, but kind of just gamifying, making a more fun process of charging your amplifier. A few more decisions to make along the way, rather than it being just kind of a straight grind. 4 times amp. Hey, why stop there? Why not a 32 times multiplier for the amplifier? Why stop at 4? Lynn asks, how many devs started MouseHunt? That's a great question. I guess 5. I guess there were 5 of us at the start. I'll feel awful if I'm forgetting anybody, but Brian, Joel, myself, Giorgio, and Jacob, I guess we're at the start. Ryan says maybe an express charm that allows you to get the exit chamber immediately as you have 100 clues on your compass. Yeah, you know, if you're not too interested in kind of boosting your stealth further in the labyrinth. Beth says, why do we stop max amplifier count anyway? Yeah, it'd be kind of fun to expand on that a little bit. I think that's kind of neat. That's one of the few areas in the game where as you level up, you get better at the area. You know, maybe it's not a great fit for a lot of places because you'll kind of move on by the time you level up. But it would have been nice even, I don't know, in the floating islands. Some of the original concepts of that had different islands and you had to be a higher level hunter to be able to visit that island. Ultimately, the way it turned out kind of didn't make sense to go that direction with the sky map and kind of have that mechanic. But before you were kind of flying around and you had to find islands to land your dirigible on. And some of them was like, you have to be an Archduke to land on this island. It's too, you know, the weather's too dangerous. You have to level up before you are an experienced enough hunter to be able to land there. And that was kind of neat. And, you know, I don't know what hunters think, but I always thought it would be cool to add things to areas for higher level hunters. Especially as some of the titles now, they take an awfully long time to achieve. So maybe a whole area that's dedicated to that title. It's a little too soon to do that, but hey, there's an area that Archdukes can come to, but if you're higher than an Archduke, you get to do a few cool things within it. The Toxic Spill was a little bit of an experiment as well to kind of have a multi-title environment, but it'd probably be better if you didn't get kicked out of the environment when it wasn't your turn for that as well, because it basically, for all intents and purposes, is, you know, an Archduke area if you want to be able to sit there without being annoyed by being kicked out every now and then. But as I'm going on tangents and I'm beginning to ramble, and it is 12:08, I have to take a quick lunch break here because we have a call coming up here at 1. So I'm going to have to head out. Hunters, thank you so much for joining me on Feedback Friday today. Hopefully you enjoyed a quick sneak peek at this big shop updates we're working on. Please, I encourage everybody, start having more discussions. Oh, I got to share the sign-up link. I'll do that in a minute. Have more discussions, whether it's on the Facebook page, forums, Facebook groups, Discord, wherever. You know, we try to lurk in as many places as we can and just kind of keep an eye on sentiments and comments as best we can. Obviously, there's a lot of hunters and there's few of us, so it's a difficult task to read everything, but we do our best. So please keep the feedback coming through lots of channels. Discuss this, dive into it, pose questions and stuff that give us good food for thought, that sort of thing, because there's a lot of moving parts and we're going to want to take player perspective into this update in a big way. So I have to share a link as well. I'm going to put that in the chat. I got to dig it out first. I sent it to Michelle. There we go. So I'll put this in the chat. I'll put it up on the screen as well. So if you're interested in helping out test this shops update, and you know, again, disclaimer, I suspect not everyone who signs up is going to be able to take part. Just we only have so much space on the test server and can only kind of manage so many responses, especially kind of at the start. But we're going to be going for a few weeks, I think, and we'll be looking to kind of expand it slowly over time based on how things are going. If things look really rock solid, then that usually spawns an instinct, okay, let's add a lot more people because surely there's got to be more wrong with this, right? But if we're getting a lot of feedback and bug reports, it's kind of usually a sign that, okay, to just keep the dial down a little bit, deal with this before we kind of expand and invite even more kind of voices into the room, if that makes sense. So it's a tricky balance to get right, because the more people we hear from, the better, but it's also, you can only hear from so many people, you know, it's only feasible to hear so many comments. Where can I put this up on the screen as well? Let me just stream for the next 7 hours here. I'm going to never stop. Oh, what am I doing? Text. All right, we're adding text. I can't even type. Brain is turning off. Hey, there it is. Let's make the font larger. Oh, that is so easy to type out. All right, so it is in the chat for your clicking convenience, but should you be watching this recorded and you cannot see the chat, which you can if you're on YouTube, there is the chat, so maybe click that. I'll post it one more time as well. It's now in the chat twice, but just in case, you can attempt to type out that extremely difficult to type case-sensitive URL. Good luck to you. If you're up for a challenge and want to test your keyboard prowess, you can try to type that out in your browser. There's a sign-up form as well. And basically, we'll be in touch. If you're selected, you'll get an email as well. So kind of keep an eye on your spam filter. It should be pretty good. It comes through kind of a recognized email server anyway. So hopefully it doesn't land in your spam. But when we create an account for you, you get emailed with a link to the beta environment, a username, and a temporary password as well. To be able to log in there, and as well some instructions on where to send feedback and how to talk with or speak with fellow testers, ask questions, that sort of thing. So again, we're going to be doing it over the course of at least 2 weeks, if not longer. So it's going to be a bit of a slow and steady. So I just thought I'd share that. That down. All right, now for real this time, hunters, I'm going to head out. Thank you once again so much for joining me on Feedback Friday today, for providing a lot of perspective and initial impressions on that shops update. And once again, I'll reiterate, please keep the conversation going. We'll be peeking in, whether it's Discord, Facebook page, forum, and stuff, just kind of lurking around, trying to read some comments here when we can to kind of gauge overall sentiment, look for if anyone has any kind of astute observations or suggestions as well. So keep it coming. And we'll expect it. Hopefully it'll be out within the next few weeks, but it's a big one, so it'll be ready when it's ready. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Thank you once again for joining me. We'll see you next week. I should be Jacob. I'm off next Friday, so it'll either be Jacob or I guess nobody, but I think Jacob's not. I think Jacob's around next Friday, so I think he'll be able to join you. Have an awesome weekend, everybody. I'll see you next time.
1, 2.
You're a trap, don't seem to mind it. You attract me, I'm a mouse, you're a cat. I don't seem to mind it. Soft and furry, oh, and just when I think I'm safe, snap. Turns out I'm never safe, snap. Just when you think you're safe, snap. I come back. You don't seem to mind it, but I'm a fool. Broke my back. You don't seem to mind it, 'cause you're so cruel. Just when I think I'm safe, snap. Turns out I'm never safe, snap. Ooh. And just when you think you're safe, snap. Turns out I'm never safe, snap. Ooh. Just when I think I'm safe, oh. Turns